other parts of the world. I'm very happy to welcome you to today's session on the role of smart mobility in sustainable and inclusive urban development, which builds on our program, the Global Future Cities program. Just to very briefly introduce myself, my name is Charlotte Mohn. I'm an urban and mobility planner at UN Habitat, who are the strategic partner and capacity building partner to the UK Prosperity Fund and the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. We're very, very fortunate to have a very diverse group of speakers with us today who will share their expertise on smart mobility and with a very particular focus on social inclusion and sustainability, which are also the primary objectives of the Global Future Cities program. So I'll very quickly walk you through our agenda for the day. We'll start with a keynote address by the British High Commissioner to Malaysia, and then we'll move into a series of presentations. So we'll have Datuk Ismail Ibrahim from the Iskandar Regional Development Authority. This is one of our participating cities of the program, and he'll be speaking about the key mobility challenges and the strategy for Iskandar, Malaysia. His speech will be followed by a presentation from Datuk Salha Saleh, who is the Deputy State Secretary for UPenn. This is the Malacca State Economic Planning Unit, and she'll be speaking to us about also the key mobility challenges and the strategy for Malacca. Following these two presentations, we'll have Matt Oakley and Rita Reddy from Mott MacDonald, who are our delivery partners for the Global Future Cities program, who will tell you a little bit more about the interventions in Malaysia. So again, we'll be speaking about Iskandar and Malacca. And after this, we'll have an international case study from Chris Lane, who's the head of transport innovation at Transport for West Midlands in the UK. So this is a UK transport authority, and hopefully he'll bring us some more global perspective or UK perspective with international best practices. After this, we would like to have a panel discussion with our speakers. I'll be moderating this, but we also very warmly welcome contributions from the audience. So if you have any questions, comments, any thoughts you would like to share with us, you can use the public chat function. I'll explain to you in a second how to use that. Then after the panel discussion, we will have some closing remarks from Michael Curthoys, who's the country manager from Mott MacDonald, again, the delivery partner for this program. And then afterwards, we would really like to encourage you to stay with us, stay online for about 15 minutes of networking. So there again, you'll be able to ask questions about the program or maybe share some of your own experiences, as we're very, very keen to hear also from you. So if I'll just quickly explain some housekeeping issues. So if you would like to comment or ask some questions, which again, we very much encourage you to do so, you can see the public chat function in the left-hand corner of this virtual space. If you click on public chat, you'll see a little text box option at the bottom, here highlighted in red, and you can write us there. We'll try to answer to you either in writing or also by speaking, of course. And then secondly, towards the end of our session, when we kick off the networking, we would like to engage you and hear your thoughts and how you travel, how you view mobility in your city. So we'll do a small poll. And for this, you'll see a little window pop up on your screen. So you'll be able to give us an answer, and then we see the aggregated responses. Don't worry, all this is anonymous, so you can be completely honest about your answers, and they're not very controversial anyway. Great, so I'll hand over to our keynote speaker or the keynote address from the High Commissioner of the UK to Malaysia. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this keynote address. And we'll now very swiftly move over to our first speaker from the city, one of the participating cities. This is Datuk Ismail Ibrahim, who's the Chief Executive of the Iskandar Regional Development Authority. Datuk, please. Datuk Ismail, we can hear you now, and you're invited to start your presentation. Thank you. Please also feel free to share your video if you like.
Thank you. I would like to wish everyone good morning and good afternoon from Iskandar, Malaysia.
Apologies, I think you might still be sorting out your video, so we can't hear you speak anymore at the moment, but we'll just give it a moment. Yeah, okay.
I hope you can see me as well as hear me.
Yes, now it's excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Right. Now, by way of introduction, Iskandar, Malaysia is an economic region established in 2006. We are an economic region geographically situated in the southernmost tip of the Asian continent within the state of Johor. We are located within international centers of economic growth that includes major cities such as Singapore, Jakarta, Shanghai, New Delhi, with a combined population of about 4.6 billion. Within ASEAN alone, which has a member country of about 10, there is a population of about 680 million, where Iskandar, Malaysia is located very much at the center of the ASEAN region. As an economic region, we are also connected by road, by rail, and we have easy access by air through our airport, which is located within this region, as well as within our neighbors in Singapore. And we are also connected by 3 seaports, all located within Iskandar, Malaysia. Now, when we began our journey for Iskandar, Malaysia, we had a 20-year journey plan. And our journey is provided by way of a plan which we call the Iskandar Malaysia Comprehensive Development Plan. That plan charts the growth of this particular region on the 20-year journey plan. And today we are on the second plan. Hopefully will also guide us all the way through, hopefully when we reach maturity by the year 2025. Now this plan, although deals with the economic growth, also speaks about not only economic growth, but also deals with matter relating to social, particularly social inclusiveness, as well as respect for the environment. Because we believe strongly that for a region to grow healthily, it must also embrace social as well as the environment agenda. Now, as an extension to that holistic growth, we are also looking at what we term as the circle of sustainability to provide a further strategic framework in driving Iskandar Malaysia's agenda. Hence, we are looking at 3 circles of growth, which we name as firstly wealth generation, secondly resource optimization and low carbon, and thirdly wealth sharing and inclusiveness. Now, in dealing with wealth generation, basically it talks about how we need to plan and implement for the economic growth of this particular region to make sure that wealth would be generated and wealth will be developed in a way in which we'll be able to of economic growth of an exponential kind. But along the way, we also need to ensure that infrastructure and all the basic mobility will be put into place so that when wealth is being generated, it is being supported by the necessary infrastructure. Now, when we talk about wealth sharing and inclusiveness, again, we are not only dealing with wealth as in growth, but we want to make sure that wealth will be spread and will be enjoyed in an equitable manner, all levels of the population. This is to ensure that whilst we generate economic growth, the people of Iskandar Malaysia, the people of the state of Johor, hence the people of Malaysia would be able to benefit from the jobs that we generate out of the investment that takes place within this region, as well as opportunities for business to flourish, which will be taken up by the local people within this region. And the measure of growth is not really about just investment, but the measure of growth is how prosperity is being enjoyed, benefited by the people at large. Now, Malaysia being a developing country, we have been going through a period of growth, and we are happy to note that we have been able to be competitive globally. But at the same time, acknowledging the fact that our resources are limited. Hence, in order to ensure that whilst we grow, whilst we ensure there is social inclusiveness, we must make sure that whatever resources that we have needs to be spent on an optimized basis, and at the same time dealing with matters relating to the environment. So that actually is a nutshell on how we look at the development of Iskandar Malaysia in a holistic manner. Now, as we developed over the last 14 years or so, definitely one of the challenges that we face is really about how to improve connectivity. In order to improve connectivity, we need to ensure that the public sector is well involved in enhancing the built environment. If you look at the illustration, as you can see, there are several challenges definitely that can be highlighted. One is relating to the population itself. Way back in 2005, when we first deal with this region, our population was only about 1.5 million. It is expected that by the year 2025, when we reach maturity, our population will reach 3 million. This means that within the same area, the population will double. Secondly, relating to transportation, it is also projected that as economy continue to grow, we will be experiencing 3 times more congestion than what it is today if nothing is done. So this will definitely put a lot of strain on movement of people, movement of cargo. Hence, it will have a direct impact on how we do business and do about our daily activities. Now, thirdly, when we deal with transportation, we also need to look at how, if we do nothing, the transportation model split will decline from what it is now, about 15%, to only about 10% by the year 2030. This means that we have to do something quite drastic in order for us to overcome and to ensure the economic will grow seamlessly. Again, in terms of land use development, when we first started Iskandar Malaysia, land use utilization was only about less than 30%, 28% to be exact. Today, the land utilization has exceeded 65%, and definitely by the year 2025 to 2030, we will reach in excess of 90%. The other point that I would like to make is as regards automobile ownership. Again, it has actually almost doubled from about 500 cars to 1,000 population to what it is now, about 800 to 1,000 population forecasted by the year 2025. And finally, of course, as regards the environment, it is anticipated that more than 13,000 tons of GHG emission will be released over the next 20 years if nothing is done. Now, in terms of targeting our measures of growth, definitely we are looking at the year in which we forecast to reach maturity. We measure our growth in terms of wealth generation, in terms of wealth sharing and inclusiveness, as well as resource optimization. As you are able to look at the left side of the illustration, it deals with investment, it deals with employment and the average household income, as well as the reduction of GHG emissions. Now, the next slide is just a pictorial illustration of how, as we continue to experience population growth, definitely there'll be a lot more movement of people and vehicles as well as cargo, which will be translated into how we look at in dealing with those issues. Now, finally, looking at the way in which we deal with sustainability mobility strategy, which is the very thing that we are today, is actually by looking at our 2025 targets. Again, we are dealing with the three components of wealth generation, wealth sharing and inclusiveness, and resource optimization. If you look at the pie chart to the right of your screen, you will find that the Iskandar Malaysia transportation blueprint translate very, very clearly in terms of how we'll deal with sustainability mobility strategy. What we are trying to say here is that we are looking at mobility from a holistic viewpoint, not only from technology, but from people, as well as from matters relating to social, business, policy, legislation, governance, and all the rest. And the other point which I would like to also emphasize, that we involve all stakeholders, because Iskandar Malaysia is not just about a single authority that facilitates, but it involves all levels of government, be it federal, state, or local. We involve the business community, including those that involve foreign investment. And more importantly, we involve the people, because we want to make sure that at the end of the day, the success of Iskandar Malaysia is really about how the people would benefit out of it. And we believe very strongly that a strong, sustainable mobility strategy that focuses on the people will be the game changer for Iskandar Malaysia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Datuk Ismail Ibrahim. I think this was a very inspiring introduction to your work in Iskandar Malaysia. You touched upon your very holistic plan that includes people as well as different level of government, and also the private sector, the businesses. So this is really interesting to hear. I think it was also interesting to know that actually, if we look at the development trajectory for Iskandar Malaysia, you're considering both urban as well as transport planning, how they're connected, and as well, you outlined some cases of doing nothing and what that would actually mean, that sustainable transport will become less, which is obviously not what we're hoping for. So this was really interesting. Thank you very much. And now we'll follow this presentation by one. Sorry, if speakers who don't speak could mute yourself, that would be great. Yes, we'll now have a presentation from Datuk Salah Saleh, who's the Deputy State Secretary from Malacca. So this is our other participating city, and she'll give some introductions and insights into the mobility challenges and the strategy for Malacca. Thank you very much, and Datuk Saleh, please.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh, and very good morning and good afternoon. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to UK Prosperity Fund Global Future Cities Program for inviting us to share the experience of Melaka related to the challenges and strategies in handling the mobility issues. As we can see on the slide, okay. There are the situation of traffic congestion in Melaka, especially during the weekend and public holiday. As a tourism state, there is a lot of tourists come to Melaka. So mobility issue is become that's something that we must to tackle in order to give a better place to visit to Melaka. So for Melaka, actually, Melaka has developed the Green City Action Plan, GCAP, whereby the goal to increase the opportunities for alternative modes of transportation and reduce greenhouse gas emission resulting from vehicular use. And the outcome from the GCAP are to improve opportunities to walk or bicycle in a safe environment, decrease of greenhouse gas emission from the transportation sector, a decrease of vehicle kilometers traveled per capita, and increase of public transport services and ridership. So this is the outcome from our GCAP. So why we focus on transportation? Because based on the data that we get, the road transportation is responsible for 59% of the carbon emission in Melaka. So based on the chart, the pie chart, you can see there is a lot. I mean, the biggest percentage is from road transportation. So beside that, our public transport only have a less than 1% of trip made by public transport. So from the, based on the Land Public Transport Agency, they set a target of 40% modal share for public transport in urban area by 2030. So there is a lot more to be done by Melaka to increase that percentage. So in Melaka, public transport actually operated by our company, Panorama Melaka Sdn Bhd. So based on our routes, there is a 24 routes and 13 of it are social routes, which do not give much profit to the bus operator. As for ridership, the number is decreasing from 2016 due to the reducing number of routes. So our bus operator also, the daily collection only contributes 53% of company income, and the rest 47% is contribute from the fund from APAD, Interim Stage Bus Support Fund from APAD. So based on this one, our bus operator actually depends on the federal contribution from the ISBSF. And our public transport also depends, have to compete with Grab and other e-hailing services. So the other why we focus on transportation is because of our tourism. So being as a tourism state, the growing tourism puts a pressure on Melaka's infrastructure, accessibility and liability. Majority of our visitors using private car during their visit. Thus, the traffic congestion becomes the main sector for Melaka, especially during the weekend as well as public holiday. So last year, actually Melaka has received 18 million tourists. The number is increasing since 2010 when we were given the status of heritage site from UNESCO. So you can see there is a lot of tourists come to Melaka, and we have to tackle the issue of mobility. So the last one, why we focus on the transportation is because of our large-scale project. There are several upcoming large-scale projects. Also becomes a challenge to Melaka to provide a better transportation services to the people. For example, For example, we will have an international cruise terminal and high-speed rail. Recently, Melaka also have mooted the idea of high-impact economic project known as Melaka Waterfront Economic Zone, MWEZ, which expected to provide new job opportunities, spur the tourism sector, and attract the new investment. The MWEZ will be a game changer for the state in accelerating sustainable and advanced development in future. So based on the issue, the challenges that we must to focus on the mobility for Melaka, there are that we have done in order to manage the transportation issues. We have introduced smart initiative, for example, smart traffic light that initiated by our local government authorities and Melaka Public Works Department. So based on this initiative, we managed to reduce our travelling time. So the time travel reduction up to 15 to 20 minutes from the point of entry to Melaka from Aikro towards our heritage area. So the other one, the travel time reduction also up to 20 to 30 minutes toward heritage area from Cheng. So based on this initiative, it is not enough. More should be implemented. Thus, under the Smart City Blueprint, actually we have planned 5 components that have been outlined to overcome this issue. One of them is smart mobility strategy. So based on smart mobility strategies, there are 4 strategies. The first one is integrated and new green public transport system. The second one is automated traffic management system using artificial intelligence. The third one is smart vehicle parking management system. And the last one is to promote the use of bicycle and walking. So they are based on these strategies. We try to do many initiatives as we can in order to tackle the issue of mobility issue in Melaka. So, for example, under the strategy 1, we try to introduce the smart bus, electrical bus, or green transport. So we hope that we can get the budget to execute the plan. So the other one is related to parking system as well as the traffic light, as I mentioned earlier. And the last one is we want to promote the cycling and walking because it's as a green area, especially in our heritage area. We want to introduce the walking and cycling in that area. So, for example, as a Melaka car-free zone, as well as a cycling campaign. So based on this is all the initiative that we plan under the smart strategies. So beside that, the other strategy especially for our public transport as a sole service provider for Panorama Melaka Sindang Berhad, the bus operator must be empowered, whereby must increase its competitiveness and reliability. The company must increase the routes as well as to add more buses and drivers as well as to use IT to offer the efficient services to the public. Besides that, the company also must explore the new business area. For example, being a tourism state, the bus operator can take the opportunity to introduce Melaka Hop On and Hop Off as another tourism product. This product might offer the service to the tourists and gradually will reduce the traffic congestion in the city, especially at the heritage site. So we hope that in a short time, we will have our Melaka Hop On and Hop Off bus to offer to our tourists. Another opportunity that can be done to overcome the issue of mobility is the transit-oriented development. Because there is a new project coming to Melaka, HSR, high-speed rail, and then it's an opportunity for the developer to develop TOD in the area of HSR station as well as in the area of Melaka Central, our terminal bus. So this can offer a new residential area for our people. So another strategies that we do in mobility issue is we also do a collaboration with other parties such as federal agencies as well as private sector, NGO, etc. Since Malacca has a little budget in development, we also ask from federal agencies for some projects such as coastal highway that can connect, can act as a traffic dispersal from our city to a coastal area. So we also have a HSR project and others. So another project that you asked from the federal is related to road, inner ring road, and as well as the outer ring road for Malacca. Besides that, we also collaborate with Asian Development Bank to produce Green City Action Plan. Smart partnership with related parties, including Ministry of Transport, APAT, and local government authority to ensure the planning can be executed accordingly. And currently, Malacca collaborates with UK Prosperity Fund Global Future Cities Program via Malacca Green Technology Corporation to help us manage the issue of sustainable city. We certainly hope that this collaboration will prolong in order to assist Malacca to become one of the cities that could attract more investment in many sectors, such as tourism, manufacturing, etc., for the benefits of our people and nation. So with this, I end my presentation. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Datuk Salha Saleh. This was really inspiring as well. So you talked us through some of the challenges in Malacca, that at the moment there's only 1% of trips being made by public transport, but then you also outlined some of your very ambitious goals that this should change and become 40% by 2030. And I think it was also very interesting to hear the big role that tourism plays in your city and how that is connected with your economy and also with the well-being of people. So that since you've become a UNESCO World Heritage Site, there's been such an influx in tourism, and you're now trying to manage that in a very sustainable manner and also ensure that the benefits of this trickle down to the different parts of society. It was good to hear about your smart mobility strategy, your plans for TOD, and many other initiatives that you're starting. So we look forward to hearing more about that later in the panel discussion as well. So thank you very much. We'll now move on to Matt Oakley, who's the team lead for Mott MacDonald, so the delivery partners for the Global Future Cities program in Malaysia, but also in all of Southeast Asia, actually. And him and Rita will go over some of the projects or the projects in Malaysia, so in Iskandar and in Malacca. Thank you very much. Matt, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much to our two partner cities. We've been working together for 12 months already, and it's good that we're in a position now to start sharing some of the things that we've done and the work that we're doing. The projects are developing very fast at the moment, as you'd expect. So today I'll take you through smart, integrated, inclusive and sustainable master plans. A brief introduction to what we're doing on Iskandar and in Malacca, and some of the challenges that we are facing and how we're working hard to overcome those. Just to be clear, obviously, the Urban Forum has got a lot of urban planners. I've talked about master plans, but in this context, just to be clear, obviously, urban planning is the branch of our architecture looking at design and organisation of urban space and developing those plans. In our context, we're talking about master planning being a framework for projects, documenting them, providing enough detail to define what you're going to try and achieve, identifying the potential codes and standards that you're going to work with, providing a route map for the implementation of the projects, setting budgets and timelines, planning how they're going to be operated and maintained. That's most important. We see too many projects get built and then are not properly maintained and gradually become inoperable because of the lack of maintenance. So simply put, it's talking about preparing a game plan for the future and providing direction as to where we go now. So talking about smart and levering the technologies that are available, it's really all about data. Everybody's talking about data. There's multiple data sources from public domain, various government agencies, and there's a growing trend towards big data. All this information that's going around, that's in our smartphones, that's coming from Waze, from the telco companies, Google and everything else, that everybody's collecting data at all the same time. And if that could be harvested, there's a lot of work that can be done. But obviously the data must be of quality, it must be reliable, it must be current. There's a mixture of historical data, which is important to understand growth trends, especially in the planning sectors. Static data, capturing what's happening, and real-time data is becoming more and more available. As I say, Waze, you can go on to journey planning apps, you can go on to Waze or Google Maps these days, and it'll tell you exactly the congestion that's ahead of you and so on. Systems should be connected, and this is one of the biggest challenges we're facing, so that they can be collaborative. We can get more from it. We can get much more powerful and more powerful information and processes, especially if it's automated, because systems are connected. And providing that analysis to make informed evidence-based decisions. We see a lot of decisions becoming subjective, becoming politicized. A lot of people in government are perhaps they're decision makers, but they may not be technically knowledgeable on some of the subject matter. So they rely on the information that's put in front of them and the reports that consultants prepare. But it needs very clear evidence of what's happening. So using simulation models, smart collection apps, ITS equipment, we're seeing more and more cameras on the streets, and traffic models and so on, and traffic control centers. Integrated, bring it all together. Of course, you know, mobility is all about moving around across multiple networks, systems and borders, which should be seamless. It should provide a seamless experience. Integrating modal transport reduces journey times and congestions, so that, you know, something simple as adjusting the bus timetable to match the train timetable, so that when people arrive at a train station, there's a bus there waiting for them, or they don't have to wait 10 or 15 minutes. Because when you have to look at multimodal and you're traveling across from perhaps a feeder bus to a train, and then catching a train somewhere and getting off the other end, if you've got to wait another 5 or 10 minutes, it just adds a little bit more time and a little bit more time, and then the overall journey time doesn't look very attractive, and people say, yeah, might as well just take the car. So this is, we've got to get the integration right. And by doing that, we can then increase the efficiency. We get increased connectivity between residential areas. We've got feeder buses serving larger systems. We've got BRT systems coming in Iskander, which will have feeder routes that can then join a trunk route to give an express route into the city. And that ultimately will make it a lot easier for people to move around, improving the employment and income prospects for the communities. Inclusive and better social outcomes. I'll hand this over quickly to Rita. She's online.
Yes, I am, Matt. Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to UK. I hope you can all hear me clearly. By way of introduction, I have to say that I'm the gender lead for Mott MacDonald, and I'm also very close to both the state of Johor and Malacca. I grew up in both states, and my family home is in Tangka, which is on the borders of Johor and Malacca. So I am closely associated with both. Today I'm going to talk about gender equality and social inclusion, which is better known as GESI. And as you all know, gender equality means the social differences between women and men, boys and girls, and it's not sex. Sex actually denotes the biological differences between male and female. And social inclusion involves being mindful and including those groups that are left behind and who are marginalized. And you heard Dr. Ismail speak about being inclusive a little earlier on. And I'd like to just say here that the 11th Malaysia Development Plan is based on the SDGs, and it's all about being inclusive and leaving no one behind. And the 12th Malaysia Plan is more focused on poverty alleviation. And looking at Jessie, it includes both of those aspects. Now, who are the marginalized groups and how do we identify them? The marginalized groups are those that are overlooked and socially marginalized, those who are voiceless, whose voices are not heard, and are disempowered, especially by their poverty and deprivation in all aspects of life. Some of those identified and listed here, such as women, children, youth, the elderly, the indigenous, the urban and rural poor, persons with disabilities, and migrant workers, were all identified under the 11th Malaysia Plan, and with further discussions between Iskandar and Melaka. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. Now, when we talk about including and being inclusive of Jessie, what do we mean? How do we go about doing it? The processes involved are really creating opportunities, avenues, mechanisms, and platforms whereby the Jessie Group's voices can be heard and their views and opinions taken on board. The first step would be, of course, to identify the Jessie Groups that we need to be mindful of, and trying to organize a consultation with the Jessie Group. The consultations have to be an honest appraisal of what can be done and what cannot be done. I think there is a need to be open and have a frank discussion at what are the possibilities so as to create a win-win situation. Now, one of the aspects involved in getting the Jessie Group involved and engaged is to create an understanding of all the senior planners and designers of the project on what are the Jessie issues and concerns and how do we best address them. For this purpose, we will be undertaking some capacity building exercises of the senior designers and planners of both projects, Iskandar and Melaka. And we have to ensure, this process is to ensure that the program is gender responsive and socially inclusive. The process has to necessarily assess and systematically take into account the differentiated needs and knowledge and experience and priorities of both women as well as the marginalized groups, and to see how we can integrate them socially and into the project, and to take into account their views and opinions. One of the recommended methodologies, and which really is a best practice, is to ensure that the Jessie Group have their inputs throughout the life cycle of the project. And one way of doing this is through the establishment of a Jessie consultative group, which works very closely with the project management throughout the project's life cycle. And this method was recommended to Iskandar, and Iskandar have really taken it on board and have established a very beautiful governance structure, integrating the Jessie consultative group into their main steering committee. Iskandar have in fact identified representatives of all the 8 groups that we have looked at as being marginalized, and they have established a consultative committee as part of the steering committee to have inputs throughout the project. And I sincerely hope, I would like to congratulate Iskandar for doing that. And I would sincerely hope that Malacca will also follow this best practice. And Iskandar have also declared their intention to keep this group on permanently to provide advice and inputs into all of their projects. And I think that's very commendable and also transformational in nature and a best practice, and something about which I will be writing up and publicizing in the future. So thank you, Iskandar, and over to you, Matt.
So obviously, thank you very much, Rita, and you've been a really great input to the team. But basically, the sustainable elements to this is in terms of the alignment with the UN SDGs. Everybody around the world is looking to align themselves with the SDGs as best as they can, and it's a long-term process. This project is we've got the same goals in terms of the outcomes and the impact on the project. And UN Habitat as a strategic partner for us on this project, they have provided and developed a tool that will be used to assess the project, not to assess us as a consultant, but to assess the project in the way it's going and how it is progressing. And they will do an assessment at 3 or 4 times throughout the project to see how we're going and how we're going on track. The photos you see on the side were a workshop that we did where we brought in key stakeholders and got their views on the various SDG principles that would be applicable to this particular project, and which ones are the key ones that we should be aiming to satisfy. And from that, the tool specifically was tailored then to each of the projects on the whole of the Prosperity Fund program. A few of the speakers I've also mentioned this, and also His Excellency the High Commissioner also raised the point that transportation and mobility is one of the largest contributors to CO2. And so if we can address mobility, we're going to have a really immediate direct effect on the environment. COVID, what happened a few months ago was very prevalent. You could see that in some of our most congested cities around the world with huge pollution problems, that they had clear skies during the lockdown. So it's proven, all the naysayers and the Trumps that don't believe in the environmental and climate warming issues, COVID has shown that. So, you know, the key things are enabling and promoting the modal shift to public transport, using green technology, moving away to reduce carbon and greenhouse gas emissions, switching to electric buses as per Malacca's ambitions, specifying sustainable infrastructure designs as well, in terms of the bus stops and the layouts and the buildings, encouraging active travel with the improvement of improved walkability and use of non-motorized transport, that last mile, first mile, last mile connectivity, and particularly Malacca's ambitions is there in the heritage area, and building in monitoring systems to measure the progress in reducing the congestion and pollution. We need to see, because obviously things are growing at the same time, we may not see any direct impacts, but at least maybe the measures we take stop it getting any worse. And it will take a while perhaps before it gets better, but we need methods and monitoring systems in order to measure that and see those improvements happening, to give us all the encouragement to keep going. So in terms of Iskandar, I won't dwell on this slide. Dr. Ismail went through this earlier and raised the case why Iskandar is so important as one of the main gateways into Malaysia and a key economic hub for Malaysia with its proximity to Singapore. The project objectives are firstly for intervention 1 is the implementation of implementation strategy for Iskandar Malaysia's smart integrated mobility management system. So this is going to be an online system that's going to pull together all sorts of pretty much across air, sea, road and rail transport, gathering data, bringing in applications, traffic control applications, linking in the journey planning applications, fare collection and all that sort of thing. So pulling all of these mobility aspects into a single platform where they can be integrated, can talk to each other. So doing that, hopefully we can help to optimize the road network in terms of its capacity, reducing emissions, developing better transport systems that are going to help the private and public sector moving goods around and freight. We talked about the need for data-driven efficiency gains in order to make the right decisions, and being able to collect data so that we've got real meaningful data to move forward on. The second aspect of the project is creating those enabling conditions that we can actually use all of this data to help us with making better evidence-based urban and transport planning decisions. So being able to capture data from environmental data, air pollution, and mapping that against the congestion, and mapping that against the congestion through the day, or looking at the schools and understanding how many children have got access to public transport and that perhaps could take the bus instead of having their parents dropping them off. So gathering all of that data, we can really see some long-term benefits for these planning professionals. So one of the key aspects to the Prosperity Fund is which stands out the Prosperity Fund from some of the other donor funds, is that they wanted a pilot project in each of our interventions so that we actually deliver something rather than a bunch of reports that sit on the shelf at the end of the project and then nobody does anything with them because they're not sure quite what to do, or there's issues on funding, or there's just the inertia of getting a public sector project moving. And so we've got a pilot project which is going to be a scaled down version of SIMS, which is going to consist of three key components. A database, which is a smart GIS database, which is going to help to start collecting data. We've got a traffic transport simulation model that is going to use that data and hopefully be fed by ITS and live traffic data, simulation data, in order for us to simulate and what's happening, but we can help then to simulate and forecast what will happen in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, or 20 years' time. And then various other applications, including traffic management and traffic control systems as well. Now, each of these we need to start now so that we can start to build up the databases and get the equipment in place and the historical data we've started collecting, so that when SIMS is operational, we've got a full set of data to drive it and all the systems. And more importantly is the capacity building. We've got to start getting people trained up in the government agencies, getting the collaboration agreements in place for sharing the data as well. So can move on because we're running short on time, but obviously collecting existing data is where we're working now, and we're starting to interact with quite a number of government agencies, local authorities within the Iskandar region and at federal level. Getting data, running surveys, adding real-time data, as well as starting to build the simulation models as well. So moving on quickly to Malacca, which is two parts. It's going to be a green bus network. So really trying to put a master plan in place for getting a bus network well structured, the correct fleet size, the correct operations plan, so that we can get something up and running that is going to start to make a difference and start to reduce congestion, as well as help the economy and help certainly some of the economic recovery. At the moment, buses can be very crowded, and with the COVID situation, we want to make sure that buses are properly planned, the timetables are planned, we're seeing regular buses so that buses are not bunched up and overcrowded as well. Looking at planning park and ride to reduce the congestion as well, encouraging working with the tourism authority to try and encourage tourists to park on the outskirts of the city and take in buses or the hop-on, hop-off bus service to go and visit the city rather than taking their cars inside. And within the heritage area is making sure that we are linked to the bus network and it's going to be well serviced. Looking at how we can pedestrianise more streets. Now, a lot of cities in Europe have talked about reclaiming streets. That got further impetus with the COVID-19 issues where people wanted more social distancing. So a lot of cities have been temporarily closing streets to traffic and opening them up for cyclists and pedestrianisation. This is a key aspect for the heritage area and is going to be one of the economic drivers to convince tourists to come back, so that they know that the city's safe, they know they can socially distance, even though it may be a busy tourist area. And obviously, it being a UNESCO heritage site, we need to be focused as well on the environment and reducing greenhouse gases, reducing pollution that's damaging buildings, reducing noise and vibration as well with heavy vehicles running through the city. And the outcomes, obviously, are really going to be not just physical. There's a lot of soft skills and capacity building required. Working with these city agencies and various government institutions to transform their approach to planning and management of these things, and looking at the long-term financial sustainability of these public transport systems, making sure they're well planned, they're not oversized or undersized, and they're servicing the right areas. Stakeholder views are embedded into the transport design, and we've got these JESI consultative groups as well, reaching out to other NGOs through a series of online surveys, and really looking at the sustainable aspects of public transport planning and creating the modal shift. And from that, we should see some really big impacts on what's happening, having well-governed technology, innovative, environmentally sustainable systems and ways of planning projects going forward, and making sure we've got robust and effective policies in place as well. And we really see the growth in the use of public transport, and that it's going to be properly managed and the assets are going to be properly managed in the future. So we face a lot of challenges, and I think every consultant faces challenges on every project they do. Because these are quite wide-ranging, we have a lot of issues, but they're really not very different between both cities. So engaging with stakeholders and partners, there are obviously many different stakeholders we have to deal with at federal level, at local level, with NGOs, community groups, civil society groups, private sector, and they've all got different interests and different priorities. So we've had to take a very structured approach at this, producing various different engagement and RACI matrices to understand what the different methods are and the tools, especially in the post-COVID situation where we can't talk face-to-face and have meetings so easily. So we have been developing a series of GIS-based online surveys which will allow data to be geo-referenced as well and capture the opinions of all these organisations and understanding their capacity, reaching out through the NGOs as well, and working closely with our other international partners and sharing links. Our next speaker for Transport for West Midlands, we've asked them to help us out in the programme because they have a very similar portfolio to Iskander. They have the HS2 coming through, so they've got high-speed rail, they've got comparable population, they've got BRT systems coming in place, they've got highway networks, bus networks, LRTs coming along as well. And they've, I think, a very comparable situation. There's a lot we're going to be able to learn, hopefully, from them going forward. Selecting standards is also one of our biggest challenges. There are various different standards to use. Obviously, the preference is to use Malaysian standards, but in some cases, there's some gaps, and we need to identify those gaps and find the right parts and the right types of international standards we can use to plug those gaps. And then trying to work with the government agencies to convince them of this and the benefits in them adopting some of these new changes and addendums to the standards as well, until the standards are changed and updated. In the tech space, this is a moving feast at the moment. It's very dynamic at the moment, very fluid, with technology advancing all the time. And there are special agencies even now within the Malaysian government that are set up under Mampu and Mari that we're starting to work with to do that a lot better. But like I say, there's lots of data out there, but getting it collaborated. Lots of people are talking about the Internet of Things. They're talking about big data, but they've got big ambitions. The problem is that this data is either not accessible or is in different formats, and people are quite guarded about the data that they have in their possession, concerned about privacy issues, how it could be shared, whether they should be sharing it, and people have got their own vested interest in what they're doing. So this is probably one of the biggest challenges. I don't think the technology is going to slow down the progress of smart cities. I think it's going to be the issue on data collaboration that is probably going to be the biggest blockers in Malaysia on moving forward into smart city territory. And training and capacity building. We talk to a lot of government agencies, and it's, well, we haven't got the budget for it. Oh, it's not in next year's budget, and it's quite a common issue. And we've got to work with them to really identify what it is they need in terms of the increase in skills and the capacity. Sometimes they need new IT systems, or they need new upgrades on software. We've got to come up with innovative ways to identify that and help them with their applications for to convince Ministry of Finance or finance departments to give them the budgets they need, and why do they need that. And I think putting those business cases together is something that we can help with. Won't go through all of this. I think you'll have access to the slides, but in terms of capacity building, it's really covering 5 areas in terms of public awareness, providing detailed planning, helping these organisations, really hitting the key stakeholders, the ones that are going to contribute and make a difference, including, as I mentioned, the NGOs, the civil society groups, providing that key technical assistance where it's needed, and really trying to promote this cultural change to learn and make the change in all these areas that are going to be necessary to implement these projects. And finally is the sustainable operational business plans. As I mentioned, they're all talking about budgets. It's not just the budget to implement it, it's the budget to keep it going and keep it growing, and getting perhaps new departments in place, or recruiting new staff, or retraining existing staff to move into these sectors. But also identifying possible opportunities for private investment or public-private partnerships as well, or creating revenue generation opportunities from these projects. Obviously, we're talking about buses, but advertising is a big source, whether it's through dynamic advertising on the buses, all over advertising on buses, or video advertising on bus stops, etc., etc. And through apps. A lot of these things are going to be driven through apps, and there's a lot of benefits in going digital in that aspect. So these are key aspects that we have to work on in order to make our master plans deliverable. So with that, I thank you. Hand it over to the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Matt, and also Rita, for these great insights about the project, about your work in Iskandar and in Malacca. Specifically, you talked about the role of data, its benefits, but also some of the challenges and where capacity perhaps still needs to be built. And then you also very interestingly touched upon the social and the environmental aspects. And Rita mentioned the consultative groups, which are really unique and quite, as you said yourself, a best practice for the program as well. So it's great to hear all your very inspiring work. And given that we're a little bit out of time, I'll quickly move on to Chris's speech. But just beforehand, we've seen a lot of discussion in the public chat room, which is excellent, and we really encourage you to keep sharing your thoughts. Just if you would like to exchange contact details, you're also very welcome to speak privately to our speakers. So there's a function to have a private chat, which you're invited to use as well. But yes, without further ado, I'll hand over to Chris Lane, who is the head of Transport Innovation for Transport for West Midlands, the Transport Authority in the UK, and he'll give us an international case study about transport innovation and the future of mobility in West Midlands. Thank you very much. Chris, please.
Thank you, and thank you for the privilege of coming to speak to you today. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about transport innovation and what we're doing with future mobility in the West Midlands, thinking about new technologies and services, but also thinking about transport innovation. Right at the heart of the West Midlands here in the UK, we are 90% of the population are 4 hours away from us and all the ports. And again, thinking about sustainability, our goal as a combined authority here in the West Midlands is to enable a healthier, happier, better connected and more prosperous population. So we're really all about those core goals, those core sustainable development goals. If we have a think about the West Midlands, if you have a look at these two maps, the one on the left shows the number of people that travel in single occupancy cars. And despite us having one of the largest urban bus networks in Europe, it's still not a fraction of the people that travel by car in the West Midlands. In fact, 63% of people make their journey by car. And some of our researchers found that even if we have roadworks, we had significant delays to your journey, people will actually still do the same thing. We've seen a significant impact from COVID-19, and this graph we've commonly seen on the screens here in the UK shows a decline in both car use and public transport use. And in fact, the advice we've been giving to people has been to travel differently, to not travel on shared transport. And we're starting to see that having an impact on a number of our industrial sectors. But what we've been doing is we've been trying to understand using data. It was great to hear Matt talking about data previously, trying to map the impact of the pandemic to what's happening on the network. So we have a daily dashboard here in the West Midlands that links by local authority area what is happening on the roads. And we link that to live traffic information. That's enabled us to understand what's happened as a result of the pandemic, but it also allowed us to better manage the road network to meet this unusual situation that we're in at the moment. And there's been good and bad. It was great to hear earlier that actually one of the things that the pandemic has done for us is shown us that we can improve our air quality, we can reduce noise, we can improve safety. We found here in the UK more people are travelling. But one really big downside is that the people that it most hits are those deprived areas, those marginalised people, and they are starting to have economic impacts and reduced access to mobility. So whilst environmentally we've seen some very positive benefits, there's been some really significant disbenefits as a result. So what have we done? Just a very interesting observation for us was when we were in lockdown here in the UK, we still had our key workers travelling, and it really gave us a unique insight onto the network here in the West Midlands. Did the transport serve those particular people? Did the buses, the trains, the trams go where these people needed to go, our key workers, if you like? Well, the answer was no, it didn't. So we had a real opportunity to start to remodel and rework that network to serve the people who most serve us here in the UK. We also see that future transport and the work we're doing through future transport zones is really going to help us as we go forwards and we reshape our networks here. We have a portfolio of projects, of transport innovation projects. that this slide shows. And the reason we have a portfolio is we believe by bringing a number of things together that we will enable the synergies of bringing those together can give us a bigger benefit than any one of them on their own. We're looking at ultra-low emission vehicles, 5G, connected and automated vehicles, future transport modes, commercial data marketplaces, many other things as well, but trying to bring them together in one place. We all have a physical road network, and what we are trying to do here in the West Midlands is to create a digital representation of that, to create a digital twin. That would mean that if a vehicle is using a road, rather than it have to sense what that road is telling it, we're able to read it. The bus, the tram, the train, the car will know what speed it should be travelling, where it can and can't park, what specific restrictions are there. And to help us do that, we created a commercial data exchange marketplace called Convex. The site for Convex is live if anyone wants to have a look at that. But the idea here is to start to bring together public and private data sets to enable a digital network. So again, we're working with companies like Jaguar Land Rover here in the UK to enable their connected vehicles to publish data. And in many cases, some of these commercial partners want to monetize that data as well. And that allows us to do this through this Convex marketplace. Data is fundamental to creating a resilient network, and that's what we're trying to do here. We are trying to enable a network that keeps moving. Our ultimate goal is to predict that something is going to happen, to respond to it before it does. So people using our network don't even know that it's occurred. We are starting to do that through the work on digitising the network and digital twins. And we have a regional traffic coordination centre that brings all of those data sets. And we've heard about a number of them, from mobile phones to traffic sensors to air quality information, bringing that all together in one place to make these decisions. We've had the opportunity here in the West Midlands to run some autonomous vehicle trials. The two pictures on the right-hand side are two trials in one of our cities. The one at the top shows a car negotiating a junction that has no give way signs, it has no road markings. The one at the bottom is what we see very often these days, walking around, people listening to their mobile phone. The car there has just stopped itself, it's driving autonomously. What we've done is we've built on these projects to create a connected and automated mobility lab with motorways, city roads, rural roads and junctions to allow us to test not just new products and a self-driving car, but new services, new mobility services using these connected and automated technologies. And across that test bed, we've created a range of technology to help us do that, from cameras to weather and environmental sensors, roadside units, 5G communications, and then actually digitising the whole of that area. So if you look at a map of the UK and look at the West Midlands, it's a very large geography, and we're able to represent quite a large real-world environment here in the West Midlands. But it's not just new products and services. We need to think about what a future transport provision might look like. And so we've been working on something called future transport zones. If you visited the UK, picture in the bottom right-hand corner is Birmingham Airport. What we're looking to do is work with partners like Birmingham Airport to understand what makes people make the choice to travel. What's their existing provision? What additional provisions can we have? And this is looking at those new forms of technology, and it's been great to hear some of the options that you've been looking at as well. Things from lift sharing, car clubs, demand responsive travel. And now in the West Midlands, we're live with e-scooters. And what we recognised actually is people want really fast and efficient access to that transport. Today, we can get most things on our mobile phone and we expect things to be instant. So we're really thinking as well about that interface provision. What is it that makes it attractive to people? Then at the site itself, at the destination, how can we incentivise people to use that sustainable travel? And then also, how can we disincentivise them? An example might be that if you're using lift share, that you can park outside of your office. But if you're not using lift share, it costs you to park. We're looking at these options really to take us forwards. But we recognise as well that it's not just provision of physical technology or physical services. A lot of our decisions are emotional. And what we try to understand is what is it that would keep you using a sustainable mode? What are the experiences that you want? And we think with COVID, this has probably changed. Initially, it might have been, yes, I want to be productive and entertained, socialise with other people, but probably now you want to feel safe. You want to manage your well-being. You want to be in control. But what we've realised is that people don't always make a decision based on logical choice. As I mentioned with the car driving, we found that we can delay people by a significant amount of time, and they will still do the same thing. A lot of our choices are emotional, and we're thinking, how can we provide these sustainable new transport modes and enhance them with different experiences to keep people there? The picture in the bottom right-hand corner is Warwick University. It's a university here in the West Midlands that's growing significantly, to a point where they need to get people to the university site and they can't get them there by car. So again, we're working with them to understand how can we get people there in a sustainable travel way. We have the privilege here in the UK of being the test site for West Midlands 5G. We're testing 5G across 3 areas, across industry and logistics, life sciences and medical, but also mobility, which is what we're talking about here. And what we're exploring is what can 5G offer us that other technologies don't. So I think I've heard already about parking. Bottom left-hand corner of the diagram there is how can we use 5G to give us more real-time knowledge of where our on-street parking spaces are. Lots of people spend time driving around cities looking for parking, but how can we use 5G in real time to get people to the right parking spaces quickly? We're also running a number of transport competitions to say to private companies, can you develop products and services using 5G that solves our transport problems? And we've got some very interesting responses back from our first round. A good example being helping people with a visual impairment use our tram system, helping them to stand on the right platform to get in the correct door, helping the tram whilst they're on the tram to understand what else is available to them that they might not normally know when they travel on that vehicle. So we've been exploring 5G and what it can offer and what it can do for us. I think I seem to have lost my slides at the moment. That's okay. Need to go back one. Very important as well, I think, when we talk about sustainability is alternative fuels. Great to hear about the green buses, the electric buses, and we think that is vitally important here in the West Midlands. And we also have some electric buses operating. We're looking at battery industrialisation. So how can we encourage battery technologies? But we've also taken the opportunity to develop a region-wide strategy to understand what's going to happen in the world of electric vehicles. So what do we think the take-up's going to be and what sort of charging might be needed? Here in the West Midlands, we are looking at whether our grid capacity is capable of supporting that and what types of chargers we might need to install right up to 2040. But also looking at new things, how can we utilise what's already there? So working with one of the broadband providers to charge vehicles at their broadband outlets, but also looking at charging on the go. And again, here in the West Midlands, had a very successful trial of a hydrogen train next to one of our energy parks. So again, we want to develop and push this new technology. So really what I'd like to say is that we've created this portfolio of projects and initiatives to really bring some synergy here to the West Midlands to allow us to try and test new services. We are seeing some of the more traditional things. We are seeing bus rapid transit being developed. We've got the privilege of high speed 2 rail coming here. There's a lot of very positive things happening. But what we're looking at is what can mobility provide through transport innovation? How can that support our industry, our research, our skills, and our industrial partnerships? We've got some key targets that we're heading towards in 2021. Coventry, one of our cities, have our City of Culture, and they will be using technology, 5G, other transport services to manage the visitor experience. So before you arrive, they will be using technology to allow you to book for venues, but then also manage capacity, overcrowding, rerouting on the journey. We've got Birmingham 22 Commonwealth Games, and again, we'd be hoping to use that technology to enable a very successful games. And we are bidding for the ITS World Congress in 2024, and hopefully if we win, we'd encourage you all to come and attend and see what's happening in the West Midlands. So I hope that's given you a flavour of some of the things that are happening in the West Midlands. Please get in touch if you'd like to know any more details. It's a really exciting time at the moment. And as we develop ourselves out of this COVID-19 situation, we think we can use transport innovation and future mobility to help us regenerate our economies and regenerate our environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. This was also a very inspiring presentation, hearing about your experiences in the West Midlands in the UK. You spoke a little bit about the impact of COVID and how that has changed mobility patterns in your area. You also talked us through your future mobility portfolio and very interestingly about the autonomous vehicle tests, but also how you're using data to really influence travel behavior, so the social aspect behind traveling. This is all super thought-provoking already, and our audience has been sharing many questions with us. So we would like to now move into the panel discussion. And given the time, we'll kind of merge this panel discussion now with the networking session. So we'll take audience questions, and we again encourage you to keep chatting in the public chat or reach out to our speakers through private chat. The very first question we would like to pose to our speakers is from Alan Wong, and he asked whether our cities, our Malaysian mid-sized cities, are ready for sustainable urban bus businesses with a focus on prosperity, so investment to return, bus operation being affordable, as well as people, so popular high passenger demand with attractive services, ease of use, good frequency, and so on, and for the planet, so clean and energy efficient buses. I think this question is quite interesting because it combines exactly what I think our interventions in Malaysia are trying to address, so using transport for prosperity, for the people, and for the planet. Would someone from our panel like to take this very first question? Perhaps someone from the cities. I think this would be quite interesting. Just a reminder to our speakers, you can raise your hand. So if you click on your name, you can raise your hand.
To raise my hand.
Thank you. Datuk Ismail, yes, if you can address this question. Thank you.
Yeah, can I address to the question that has just been posted?
Yes, please.
Yes, I think basically on the bus operation, as far as Malaysia is concerned, we can simply put that we are actually ready to embark upon public transportation system using buses as a basis and as a platform for that. Why I say that is because in Iskandar, Malaysia, we are embarking on a massive public transportation enhancement project that would be in the form of the bus rapid transit. It will progressively replace the existing bus public transport system by embracing technology that is currently available under the bus rapid transit. We have actually put up and this effort at the design stage, where in its implementation it would definitely be incorporating those matters as regards the environment, on how we are able to save energy, as well as using alternative source of energy to make sure that at the end of the day, the bus rapid transit that we're going to put in place in Iskandar, Malaysia will not only be effective, efficient, but it will be affordable as well as safe, and most importantly, it will continue to respect the environment, and it will help to bring down the GHG emission over a period of time. I do not wish to detail out the project because it will definitely take time. But definitely to those of you who are interested to know more about how we have embarked upon this project, definitely we were more than happy to share the details. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Datuk Ismail. Would someone from Malacca also like to comment on this question? I think it addresses both cities.
Okay. Actually, for the bus business model, actually for Malacca, we already transfer from individual operate to government owned contract operate. But unfortunately, our Panorama Malacca Sdn Bhd, because I think we must get a strong support from the government to buy a bus, to make it efficient, to give the service to the public. So Malacca tried this. Unfortunately, currently we are trying to get a new business model for Panorama. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. This has been great. We have another question also back to IRDA, to the Iskandar Regional Development Authority. And the question is whether your BRT, so your bus rapid transit investments are sustainable. Perhaps if Datuk Ismail or Kamisa, if you could comment on this.
Okay. Now, the answer is a simple yes, it is sustainable because we believe very strongly sustainability here means not only from the user's perspective, but also from the financial perspective. Let me deal with the financial perspective first. BRT has been proven that it is involving a low capital cost compared to MRT or LRT, and the returns that would be generated from the ticketings and all other resources definitely would be on a shorter term timeline rather than on a longer term. So it means from a financial perspective, it is definitely sustainable. And we have actually incorporated that model into the BRT that we are working on now. Now, in the long run, from a user's perspective, definitely BRT is a model that is flexible, meaning to say as population grow within the region and as cities and towns continue to grow from an economic perspective, where population increase, definitely there'll be an increased demand for usage of the BRT. And the flexibility would enable this line to be added by way of the trunk route or the direct route, and more importantly, the feeder system. And we can even, at the end of the day, if population would allow to go into other modes of transportation to coexist side by side with the BRT. So we can truly say sustainability from that perspective. And sustainability from environmental perspective, definitely this is another positive and strong point, meaning to say that even at the design stage, we take note of the need for us to ensure that the cost of running this whole operation will enable us to reduce emissions. As mentioned by Matt earlier, that is how I think part of the work that is being carried out is also to look into the public transportation system, hence the BRT system in Iskandar Malaysia. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Datuk Ismail. I think we'll just take one last question and then we'll move to the closing remarks. So our last question comes actually from a program partner, Peter Oborn, who works for the UK Built Environment and Advisory Group, who is our capacity building partner. So their organization will be working with all the cities of the program to build capacity. And his question was addressed to Chris Lane. He was asking, can you please share details of the data exchange marketplace?
Yes, happy to do that. So we have a website. So if you just search for Convex and data exchange, you'll come across our website. I'll put the details of the website in the chat. But it is a commercial data exchange. So the idea is if you've got a data set and you want to monetize it, that you can place that within that platform, and then people can use that and can share that data. So I'll place that information in the chat.
Excellent, thank you very much. And for everybody else, if you have more questions or comments, if you would like to get in touch with us, we've put our contact details on the slide that you can see now. So we do have a website for the program. It's www.globalfuturecities.org. And then Mott MacDonald has 2 email addresses through which you can use them. So malaysia@mottmacdonald.com, as well as GFCP, so Global Future Cities Program, Iskandar Project at mottmacdonald.com. And then if you would like to reach us through the UN Habitat team, you can also do so at UN Habitat -globalfuturecities@un.org. Once again, thank you very much to our speakers, also the audience. It's been very engaging. And I would now like to hand over to Michael Kurthoys, who's the country manager of Mott MacDonald Malaysia, for the closing remarks. Thank you very much. Mike, please.
Thank you, Charlotte. And thank you all for all the fascinating insights and presentations that we've seen, I think covering a massive range of topics and areas that certainly provoke a lot of thought on how we actually take this forward. We're obviously looking at a COVID-19 reinvigoration of transport. The challenges remain. We've got an area of massive growth in Iskandar, and we've got move to the next one, and that connection with Singapore, albeit very quiet at present, but I'm sure that won't be for long. And we need to reinvigorate what's going on in Malacca. Tourism is already up, but those challenges will remain, as well as the growth that's happening, which creates the underlying mobility challenge. We need to look at meeting the modal challenges to reduce greenhouse gases. We've got significant population growth, and if we're to achieve that 40% shift to public transport use, it's a huge target, and that's obviously significant with such a low ridership in Malacca and such large increase in per capita vehicle ownership in Iskandar has been pointed out. Use of sort of the holistic ecosystem that then kind of leads to these smart mobility methods that enable us to achieve these sustainable levels, and also the movement towards green buses, taking those pollution creating vehicles off the road and replacing them. But that also has to be systematic and planned, and these things don't happen overnight. We've got the challenges of creating a modal shift and acknowledgement of, I think people have acknowledged the challenges they have, and it's fascinating to understand exactly where the baseline is and what we've got to move to. So, and that will enable that provision of wider mobility services to manage the growth in both states. Looking at multi-modes, it's obviously something that Transport for West Midlands handles already. It happens to a greater or lesser extent in the Iskandar Malaysia region. Obviously Malacca is a lot more really just a one mode system, and how we can build on those, or how we can even make buses multimodal, just needing to rethink and replan what we do. That said, I think as has been shown, we do need to use the data that's available to provide that evidence to plan for the future. All these are interlinked with the improvement of outcomes, both inequality and in social inclusion. The critical ability to access employment, healthcare, and much more reasonably priced foods and all these sorts of things that we take for granted when we jump in the car. But we've still got to bear in mind that, say, smartphone technology in Malaysia is still used by less than 60% of the population. We also want safe transport for our family, and I think a lot of these aspirations are captured well in the SDGs. Okay, next one, please. So, kind of wrapping up, I think there are, the two areas which act as important foundations for what's going on and how this project is developing. So there's the advancement through collaboration. I picked on the use of standards because that's something perhaps many of us recognise as our baseline for what we do, and some of the chat has already alluded to that. And I think it's important, that's one of the frameworks. It's not the only one, and that therefore, we're kind of reaching out to you to help in this collaboration. So those online, make sure we get your details. If you've got something you want to provide us with, we're very, very open to it. We want to discuss the best things that are available on the market, which brings me to the right-hand side of the slide. So, we're seeking smart technology to support these projects. You've seen they comes in a massive shapes and sizes. I suspect many of them, we don't actually know what will be available by the time lots of these systems really get implemented and up and running. We look at 2030 targets and just think where we were in 2010 and how things change in that time. So that's the challenge. It's all about talking to one another, sharing these experiences, finding out what's available in the market, what people are providing to us in Malaysia, UK and beyond. So please share those experiences, share that information. You've got our email address, next slide, which is carefully shown on the next slide. So to wrap that up, can I just offer my thanks to the High Commissioner, His Excellency, the High Commissioner, for his opening remarks, to the input from our two city partners, Datuk Ismail Ibrahim and Datuk Salah Saleh. Thank you very much. For Chris Lane from Transport for West Midlands, thank you very much. UN Habitat for helping organise this. FCDO for their input and their daily support, and to Urbanice for actually keeping us on here longer than I thought we would be. So thank you very much. Terima kasih ke atas. And there's our email addresses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And this ends our session. I will not comment more. I think the closing remarks were perfect. Thank you very much. Terima kasih. Goodbye.